Good evening, and thank you for joining us for a conversation with Paul Murdoch, architect of Flight 93 National Memorial. I'm Donna Gibson, Executive Director for the Friends of Flight 93 National Memorial and the host for tonight's program. Our program this evening takes place not just near history, but within it. The Flight 93 National Memorial is more than a site. It is an experience of architecture, landscape, and meaning. We are honored to hear from the architect who translated an unimaginable event into a place of reflection, memory, and heroism. Thank you for joining us this evening, Paul. We're so glad to have you with us.
Thank you, Donna. It's great to be here.
So, you were selected through an international design competition. What drew you to this project, and what responsibility did you feel as you were approaching it?
I was on the West Coast on 9/11. I came to work and, the events were unfolding. Everybody was watching on computer screens in the office, and it was clear um, that things weren't going to be the same after this event. So it was really frustrating just watching this unfold. um, not being able to do anything. And so it was a matter of resolving to try to do something afterwards, as architects, as designers, to pay tribute to the 40 people who fought back on that plane and understanding the significance of what they did. So the responsibility of this carried forward from that. And at some point I saw something about the competition for the memorial design in a publication, and that's when, you know, it, the idea of participating through the design of the memorial came about.
Okay. And so, what was your earliest vision for how the site should feel to visitors?
Um, I think the two words that come to mind, that was the impulse for that feeling were reverence. There's a certain degree of reverence on the site that we wanted to achieve, and awe. Um, and you know, we wanted to do something heroic on the one hand, and we started sketching, a couple of architectural ideas, and then we had sent for the competition brief, and it came with maps and drawings and photographs, and then we realized how large the scale of the landscape was. So it became clear that rather than the architecture being primarily the memorial expression, that we would do it through the land. And that way, that act of heroism through the scale of the land, the reverence, the awe of that landscape really was the vehicle of all that was the land itself.
And I guess that's the living landscape of Flight 93 National Memorial. So, how did you represent both tragedy and heroism?
Um, the as I mentioned, the heroism really came about through using the land itself, not only the scale of the land, but the qualities of the landscape. Um, and so there was this inherently beautiful landscape of the Laurel Highlands. And um, it was a scarred landscape, though, because of coal mining, because of, commercial scrapyard on the site, et cetera. So you had this dialogue in the land already. You had this really beautiful landscape on the one hand, and this kind of scarring. So that dialogue in the land itself was part of, how we drew out those qualities in the memorial expression. Um, and then also recognizing certain forms that came about, like references to an airplane wing, for example, that we sort of juxtapose some of those aerodynamic forms against natural forms. So there was always this kind of dialogue in mind. Um, the you go to the memorial and the palette is very subdued, right? It's gray concrete, it's black stone or black aggregate and whatnot. But that's always recognizing that the landscape is changing all the time. It always has the colors of the seasons and it's forever changing. So um, that dialogue between a very sort of restricted and minimal kind of architectural intervention and the rich variety of the landscape is what we were trying to play with.
And so, what was a defining moment when the concept came into focus for you?
I think it may have been uh, that moment when we realized that it wasn't going to be more about architecture, it was going to be more about the land. I mean, I think that was the key moment, and then really just starting to understand the landscape itself and what happened where and what's on the land. There's high points, there's low points, there's wetlands, there's a huge field, there's woodlands. So there were a lot of qualities of the landscape. And then, there was this juxtaposition with the flight path.
Mhm.
So if you look at the backfield open coal mine is roughly circular in shape. And so that's where we got this idea of this sort of open field, the field of honor, if you will, and then this very severe slice through that landscape that the plane took before it crashed. So is the tension of that against the different qualities of the land, and then moving people through the landscape, not just being static in it.
Right. So, we often speak about heroism in human terms, but here it is expressed through land, materials, and experience. How do you translate something as intangible as heroism into the physical design?
Uh, big question. We well, for example, I talked about the scale of the land, right? So you have something like that you can use to express something heroic in scale, right? To get that quality. Um, but there's also things that are more shaped, right? And so the use of like raw concrete, for example, it has a visceral quality to it. It's robust, and so these are things that we can more willfully work with in the forms and the materials. Um, if you look at the gate, for example, the ceremonial gate,
Right.
um, it's made of these heavy hemlock timbers, and it's sawn into 40 facets, one for each of the passenger and crew members, and it's hand hewn, so it's on a massive hinge. So this thing it's a tough gate, right? It's meant to feel tough, and it has a quality of fighting that the passengers and crew members took on. So it's not just the inherent qualities of the landscape, but it was also very kind of willfully working with forms and materials uh, to draw out the qualities like that.
Right. And Paul, I know that you use the hemlocks a lot. Do you want to talk a little bit about how the hemlock, the burning hemlocks impacted your design elements?
Yeah, in a number of ways, but kind of fundamentally the hemlock tree and grove, which withstood the crash, absorbed the impact of the crash, um, became the inspiration for the motif, the architectural motif throughout the memorial. Not only is the hemlock grove the backdrop of the crash site, which is what the memorial focuses on, um, but we took the structure of that tree, which has a very straight trunk and these angled alternating branches. We took that form and worked it into the joinery of paving and metalwork. And so you see it throughout as a layer throughout the project. And and then, of course, metaphorically, the hemlock grove has relatively shallow roots. And it's the intertwining of those roots that gives the strength to the grove. So, like the 40 passengers and crew members who fought together, who came together on the flight, it seemed like the hemlock was the the perfect inspiration for what we wanted to express in the memorial.
So I know, Paul, when I have people at the memorial and we're touring and we talk about all of these design elements, the one thing that I hear quite often is, wow, like so much thought went into every piece of this memorial. Can you expand on that a little bit? I mean, it's just overwhelming, I think, to some people. You can walk through the memorial, but not understand. You see it, it's
Mhm.
beautiful. But when you hear about all of these elements that you use to make this all come together, what was the inspiration for all of that?
Well, that's nice to hear.
Oh, I mean, people were just
Thank you.
amazed.
I think that um, it's important that the memorial operates on a lot of different levels because there's a broad array of people that come to it that are coming from different places, and I don't mean just different locations. I mean they're coming in different states of mind, feeling, preparation, background. And they access information differently. They experience things differently. So we really try to layer meaning through a lot of different elements, and whether they're subtle or whether they're quite apparent and very animated. Um, so yeah, I mean, people wouldn't necessarily know that the joint pattern in the stone refers to the hemlock grove. Um, they may not even know that the flight path walkway is on the trajectory of the plane.
Right.
But once they find that out, it becomes extremely poignant.
Yes.
And one of the things that's important at Flight 93 is that the visitor center is there
Yeah.
and the narrative can be told there. People can learn about what happened on Flight 93 in the visitor center. We don't have to say that all throughout the memorial. The visitor center is there for that narrative. So the memorial can take on really a different kind of level of communication or levels of communication. It's not so reliant on narrative. It's more reliant on, you know, form, movement, texture, color, pattern, and sound, right? So that, and it's all in the natural context, so that I think all of those different ways of expressing through the memorial offer different types of opportunities for different people to experience and hopefully get something meaningful out of it.
Right. So is there a specific design element that visitors might overlook but carries a deeper meaning?
Well, I mentioned the flight path walkway, and the hemlock motif. I think those are key. Um, I mentioned the gate and its 40 facets.
Right.
Um, Ultimately, when the groves are thriving, there's 40 groves. So there's a lot of symbolism. Um, the benches, the big benches along the Memorial Plaza are, um, have an aerodynamic kind of a wing shape. And um, one of the things that people may not know is that the the shape of the Memorial Plaza along the crash site really follows the original fence line that fenced off the crash site after shortly after 9/11, and that's where the forensics operation took place.
Okay.
So I would encourage everybody to talk to the volunteers and the rangers out there because they know a lot about all of this. And so there's a lot of information that's latent at the site through not just the visitor center and the memorial features, but also through talking with the people that are there, that are the stewards of the site.
Well, I always love saying to somebody at the Wall of Names, stand back, tell me what you see, and then stand up closer because I think that's such a great symbolism of individualism, yet collectiveness, and
Mhm.
very thoughtful design element.
Yeah, each slab, each of the 40 slabs has its own inscription of one person. Um, one slab has, something about an unborn child.
Right.
And so there's a story for each one of those slabs, of course. But together they form this wall, and um, it's along the flight path right before the ceremonial gate. And I know for those who didn't understand that and then found out about it, it's a pretty powerful thing to come to terms with.
Yes, very much so. So this site is both a memorial and the actual place where events unfolded. How did that reality shape your approach to the memorial design?
Um, I think the attitude that it engendered in us is that we didn't want to create something that would upstage what was there already. And so we set about framing, reframing, amplifying, heightening, but not replacing, not upstaging, not, so there was so much to work with there already because it was the site of the crash and what happened that day that um, we really just wanted to work with what was already there and kind of heighten the meaning of those places through a certain choreography of moving through the land and recognizing key thresholds that led from one experience to another, whether it's for example, the 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 tall portal on the flight path walkway, um, and creating that threshold where the flight path meets the edge of the field of honor, and walking through that very narrow opening, and then that whole field opening up to you, and then looking down at the crash site for the first time. I mean, it's that kind of amplifying and heightening, those places are there, but it took shaping memorial features to really highlight the meaning of those places and offer, a little more powerful experiences of those than had there been nothing else that came later.
Right. So if you were to guide a visitor to move through the space in a meaningful and emotional journey, how would you recommend that they experience the site?
Um, well, the site's a very long, it's over 2 miles long, right? So when you come off of Route 30, the first feature you see is the Tower of Voices. And it really is up to somebody as to whether they want to stop there first or they wanted to stop there on their way out last. And I think that has a lot to do with where people are coming from, how long they've been on the road, what all kinds of things.
Right.
So the tower itself is really a beacon near the entrance and exit. Um, Once you drive down the road or walk or bicycle down the road, you come to the visitor center. And I think our intention was that people would stop there. And we understand that most people, the first thing they want to see when they arrive at the memorial is where the crash occurred.
Right. Yes.
And so the visitor center area is set up to arrive, to park, to get out of the car, to do what you need to do, and then head down the walkway, which is, sort of pulled, you're pulled down that walkway by virtue of that portal through the big walls that I mentioned.
Right.
And so it really directs you right down to the overlook. And so people people are already in a very different frame of mind by the time they realize that the visitor center is right next to them once they've seen that.
Right.
And we want them then to go into the visitor center, read about the story, listen to transcripts and, recordings and whatnot. But it's a it's a very powerful experience to go through that visitor center, even though it's quite small. It's very intense. And ideally, from there, you would walk out the opposite end that you came in, onto the Allée, which walks around by all of the groves and descends the hill in a very gentle way. But it's that circular route around the edge of the field of honor,
Right.
which you've been introduced to at the Overlook. And it's meant to be really a reflective and contemplative walk.
Yes.
Um, Not everybody can do it. A lot of people take the drive around, which is okay too. I mean, the idea is that from that experience at the visitor center and the Overlook, you have some time to absorb that before you arrive down at the Memorial Plaza and then walk along the crash site and arrive at the Wall of Names. So it's meant to be that kind of choreography,
Okay.
that kind of sequence. A
Mhm.
lot of people will go from the visitor center and take the meandering trail down the Western Overlook.
Right.
That's also fine. That's a very different way than a very formal, curved, gentle slope around the field of honor and over the wetlands. Ideally, people can do it one way or the other. I bet
Right.
it's meant to be walked ideally. And it can, it's accessible, so people with disabilities can also do it. That whole route through the park is accessible. And I think moving through a natural environment and at that scale enables people to, you know, to be able to take in something that it'd be harder to do in an urban environment or a noisier, chaotic, or more buildup. I mean, it's the memorial really tries to take advantage of this beautiful setting and the variety that nature provides
Yeah.
and the sort of restfulness that it can provide as well. So that by the time you come down to the Memorial Plaza and you walk along the crash site, you're in a different state of mind and feeling than when you arrived into that parking lot at the top of the hill.
Yeah. I mean, I've been there for 15 years and I still find going into the visitor center can sometimes be very overwhelming. And I've seen them and I've watched the videos. I've seen the videos that are there and heard the conversations. And what I find is walking the trail kind of helps you reflect again on the power of what those 40 people did
Yeah.
and to kind of just contemplate and you're right, the nature and now that there are so many birds and we have so much wildlife there, it really adds to that being able to decompress
Hmm.
from the heaviness.
Yeah.
So I know that when you were designing the memorial, you had a lot of collaboration with families and stakeholders. So how did the families of the passenger and crew influence the design process, Paul?
Um, well, pretty powerfully. Um, we we designed our concept in the first phase of the competition without having met any of the family members or seen the site. Now, fortunately, a lot of good preparation had been done establishing the mission statement, which included the families that was in the competition brief, and there was a lot of good material that described the site. So, you know, we felt good about the master plan and the elements that we put forward in the first phase. But after the shortlist of shortlisting the 5 finalist teams, we were invited to come to the site and meet many different people, but including the family members. And of course, once we did, it just became kind of overwhelming emotionally. So not only was it extremely important for us to experience that, but and just hear some of the stories of family members, loved ones that were lost, but also to understand that the families knew wasn't just about them. The families fully recognized this was for them and everybody else, the nation, international. It was a large mission, and that appreciation, even for the people that lost as much as they did, was really moving.
Yes.
And I think one of the difficulties of doing the design was being able to, in some way, suspend the raw emotions so that it wasn't purely emotional. It's historical, right? So, it's something that has to endure over generations. And this is part of what the families wanted. Um, but uh, to embody it can't be purely emotional to be historical, but it needs to embody the emotional so that it remains personal over generations for everybody who comes there. Um, this is an important aspect of a memorial, I think. Um, so even though it's somewhat minimalistic, if you will, as design, it has to be emotional. It can't be abstract, right? It has to be emotional in its experience. So I think, a lot of the people that were on the jury that we met appreciated that the families brought to the review process, the people that selected us ultimately, that went through those went through the 1,100 original entries, and then another jury went through the five finalist entries. We're composed of family members and professionals.
Okay.
And the professionals said how much they appreciated the input of the family members because they brought a dimension to the design and the perspective that they wouldn't have had as just professionals. And conversely, the family members appreciated what the professionals could bring that they
Right.
may not have been trained to see, and so it was extremely important for the families to be involved from our, design perspective, but also um, they were champions of the design once we were selected, and they were committed to making it happen and making it happen at a level that was commensurate with the competition, design that was selected. So, absolutely invaluable to
Yes.
have the families involved.
So, Paul, you mentioned about future generations. So, how do you hope future generations who do not experience 9/11 firsthand will understand the space?
Um, well, I hope that they learn the story of Flight 93 first, and it seems like a simple thing, but um, we can see how important just some very basic things are to make sure they happen. And one of them is to just learn the truth about what happened on Flight 93 at this site. And then I hope they have the emotional experience that moves them, that deepens that knowledge of what happened. I hope they're able to experience it to affect their own lives. And so that it is relevant going forward. It's not just an artifact of the past. The reason it's a memorial is that it's alive for people in the future to continue to remember what happened and for that to have meaning for them in their own lives.
So, what responsibility do places like this carry as memory shifts from lived experience to history? And I think you kind of touched on that, but I
I,
mean,
I think that, yeah,
we have
I,
100 million people who were not alive on September 11th.
I think the question kind of reveals the answer. The responsibility is the shift from of memory of lived experience, those that went through it, to the process of remembering history.
Right.
It has that responsibility.
So I'm going to have you do some personal reflection. So, what has this project meant to you personally and professionally?
Um, well, it's been the most profound in both cases. Um, Professionally, uh, it was, it's been an immense responsibility. It has challenged in every kind of way professionally. It has dimensions as a project that are unparalleled. Um, so, there's been a huge amount of growth, I would say, professionally, um, through it. And I really could say the same thing personally, that the relationships of people that we shared this experience with, in terms of realizing the memorial, um, the the people that it affects who continue to come to the memorial,
Mhm.
um, but also the sort of profound, kind of emotional experience that we had personally. I mean, it really touched on every possible emotion that you can imagine. So, yeah, very, very profound in both cases.
Sure. So, what stays with you most when you visit the memorial today?
Um, I I guess I would say that, we set out to design a memorial that would evolve over time, through visitation, through interpretation, stewardship, um, so that it remains active and relevant. And and so I think, visiting at this stage to see that that is happening is maybe what stays with me the most. Um, there's obviously all of the different elements that still are there and are moving. But yeah, I would say that that intent to design the memorial that way, um, because we've had to turn it over, right?
Right.
And
Like giving up your baby, right?
yeah, and after 15 years of working on it, ultimately it's turned over to the public and it's turned over to others to carry it on. And it was important to realize that early on.
Right.
And I think, now that we go, it's been 5 years or so since we've really, quote, worked on it. And it's very gratifying to see that that's the case. I mean, it's being looked after and it's growing. It's doing what it should do. Hmm.
I would love to have the opportunity, Paul, to have you go with a group of people who have not experienced it. And as you walk through and you explain the various elements, and just to see their reaction to all of the details. That's the word that a lot of people say, the details that you put into the memorial design. It's just magnificent.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, I'd be happy to.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if visitors leave with one feeling or thought, what do you hope that it would be?
Mhm. Well, I mentioned the feeling of reverence and awe early on.
Mhm.
I would hope people feel that. Um, and then, you know, as far as what they would think, or, what, I mean, the mission of this place is to it's a place to pay tribute to the 40 heroes of
Right.
Flight 93 who gave their lives for our freedom. And um, it's also a place to measure our own lives against those actions. They were everyday people like us who were brought together by fate and came together as a group to take action to meet this historic challenge and gave their lives for it. I mean, it's just such an amazing story that um, I can't imagine, not sort of taking a measure of yourself when you experience that and when you learn that story. It's incredible.
Right. Right. Well, I'm going to invite questions from the audience. So anybody have any questions for Paul this evening? There's something in the chat here. Most monuments seem content to sit quietly and make their statement visually. The Tower of Voices takes a different approach. Since there are a few other examples around the world where sound is an essential part of a monument, I'm curious whether any of them influence the design of the Tower of Voices, especially since it's become the final piece of the memorial, or whether the idea grew entirely out of the Flight 93 story and the memorial's overall vision.
Hmm. One of the early ideas that we presented in the first board, the competition board, was a tower of voices. And the inspiration for that was because a lot of the last memories of passengers and crew members were through their voices on phone calls before the plane crashed. So we also understood from the competition material that the wind was going through this site usually.
Yes, almost every day.
So that was the inspiration for the Tower of Voices, is that we would do something um, in sound to recognize those voices, and that we would use the natural forces of the site to engender those sounds. So again, it's this sort of the event coming together with the site,
Right.
which we've done throughout the memorial. Um, so that this idea of this memorial expression came out of, the project. Now, how are we going to do this? Well, we actually we went we went down to the Disney Concert Hall here in Los Angeles, and we talked to the guy that was in charge of the organ, and we said, we think we're trying to do a percussion instrument here, but we don't know a lot about anything yet. So he gave us a tour of the organ, and then he brought out a pipe, and we wanted to use chimes and these pipes and had this basic idea, but he said, now blow across the top of the pipe, and you do it, and then you don't get much sound at all. He says,
Okay.
well, an organ doesn't blow across the top of the pipe, it blows through the pipe. And in order to do that, in order to create like an organ, that's what you'd have to achieve. You're going to have to do a percussion instrument and find a way to get the sound from that chime in a different way, that pipe in a different way. So there are a couple of sculptures or maybe memorials um, that use wind through pipes, but they sort of like whistle. It's a different thing than striking a chime. It's using the wind as like a wind instrument through a series of pipes or tubes.
Okay.
and that's not really what we were after. We wanted something that was, um, had a certain resonance, and the way that a chime, like a deep, large chime struck, seemed more like the right kind of instrument. And so there was a lot of work from there to get to what we have out there. But um, yeah, it was original idea for the feature, and then coming to terms with the fact that, yeah, these are going to be wind chimes in this tower, and then figuring out all of the technical issues around that
Right.
was the focus.
So the next question is, what is your favorite architectural element at the memorial?
Well, I'm gonna turn the question a little bit on its side. I'm gonna say one of my favorite elements out there is the boulder on the crash site because it's not an architectural element. Um, it was important that the crash site, to the families, it was important that the crash site was as close to the condition before the crash
Okay.
as it would be going forward. So um, when there was a request to sort of mark a point in the field of the crash site, um, what we didn't want to do was design something willfully architectural. And that's why we said, let's find a boulder from the site, something that's natural to the site, doesn't call attention to itself, but marks a point in that crash site, which seemed important to the families and to the public because they didn't know where did the plane crash? Where did the impact point occur? And where can the families go when they walk into the crash site and, sort of as a focal point? And so I'm going to skirt the answer to that question by saying something non-architectural is something I like.
So are there specific design elements that were changed from your original idea due to the input from the family members?
Well, the crash site. Um, we had originally intended on planting uh, like a flower mix on the field in the crash site, so that there would be this kind of focal point of color. And there was topsoil, maybe a foot of topsoil that was put on the crash site after it was backfilled and the forensics operation was concluded. So you could plant wildflowers, you could plant bulbs, you could plant, there's a foot of topsoil to work with without disturbing the site underneath it. But the family members they didn't want that. They didn't want anything like that. They wanted it to be in the condition that it was before the crash, as much as it could be. They understand, things are going to change over time and trees are going to grow, and but so we respected that, and instead we used the wildflower mix in the field. We
Yes.
sort of turned it so that the natural condition of the crash site is the focal point. It's the wildflowers in the field around it rather than in it.
Right. So this person says, I serve as a volunteer ambassador and I'll often interact with guests as they visit the Memorial Plaza and the Visitor Center. If you could have guests know one thing about each place, what would you like me to share with them?
With each place,
Yes.
Mm. Oh, I mean, there's a lot, right? So, I think, I think one thing that's important is, as I mentioned, that the overlook, the path overlook occurs at the intersection where we created a circular edge around the bowl, the field of honor. It's the intersection of where the flight went overhead and the edge of that field. So this is a very powerful moment in the site. It's where those walls frame the sky, where the plane went overhead, and where the visitor center is between the walls. It starts the pathway down on either side to the crash site. Um, and it's where the glass guardrail says a common field one day, a field of honor forever.
Right,
So, you know, um, I think from that vantage point, you're able to see most of the features. You can't see the tower from there, but it's important to realize that that place, that intersection, was chosen because of the fact that it is that intersection. It is such a powerful moment in the land there. Um, and then the narrative on the guardrail sort of introduces not just the field and the crash site below, but also the visitor center. And so I would say that bringing guests there, that is the moment of orientation.
right,
Um, it's certain some of the expectations have been fulfilled, but you can see how much more there is.
right,
And I couldn't really say, about every place at the memorial right now, but
right.
I would say that about that place. And then from there, there's so much to be experienced and sort of oriented to.
So David Beamer says, Paul, I just want to say thank you. I remember coming to see you in California to discuss your vision. Well done, David Beamer.
Thank you, David.
And we have people who leave there after their first visit almost always talk about the recordings. How did you balance the use of that material in a way that wasn't sensationalized? It's very subtle but enduring.
Yeah, I would say that I probably made myself about as unpopular as I could in the whole discussions about what was going to be in the visitor center. Um, we knew that it was a small space. It's tempting to do too much.
Right,
And of course, if you go to New York, if you want to see pretty much everything, you can go to New York. But here we didn't have a big visitor center to work with. And so it's very important to we said, okay, we're just going to have 5 walls in that hall, double-sided, and that's where the exhibition material can be,
right,
but it's not going to be cluttered with stuff everywhere. And it needed to allow enough space around those exhibition walls to not, hopefully people don't feel crowded. Hopefully they feel they can have their own moment there, their own experience. And then there's also the view window. If things get a little too intense, you can just move off to the side and look out at the land. So what went on those 5 walls was critical.
yes,
And there was, a good exhibition designer And the Park Service and people working with the Park Service that knew the collection of material, et cetera, et cetera. So there was an awful lot that went into culling through potential material for the visitor center and really just paring it down to, the essentials. And one of those was so it wouldn't be overwhelming in a sensationalist way.
Right.
It wouldn't be overwhelming in sort of a quantity of material, and it's like very, very focused. And I think the recordings do that. They provide a really poignant experience, very intimate, and I think everything in there does that in some form or another.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Paul, is there anything else that you would like to add for the audience while we still have you on the program?
Well, I would just encourage everybody to visit the memorial and you know pay tribute to what those 40 people did, and encourage people that to do the same. I think it's an important part of American history and it's an important place in America. So I would hope that every American would have the chance to see it in their lives and experience it. So,
So Paul, one other question. How can young designers learn to approach projects with this level of purpose and sensitivity?
well, yeah, I don't, I guess what I would encourage young designers to do is, uh, sort of help renew an appreciation of nuance. Um, the media environment, social media and whatnot can be pretty overwhelming. It can be bombastic. Um, we're driven to extremes today in our media environment, and I think what's important about this memorial is that 40 people of all walks of life came together and did something very profound and powerful. Um, and as I mentioned early on in the talk, the idea of providing layering of meaning so that people with different backgrounds, different sensibilities, uh, can access it in a way, because not everybody can do it the same way, right? So this requires nuance, um, and and so I think there's an appreciation there that's important, and that's something I think young people can struggle with in the current environment. Um, it's important how it's said. It's important how it's expressed and how it's not expressed. Um, it you know, poetry is important. Mystery is important. And there's a lot of nuance to how an expression can help somebody um, understand or appreciate what they're going through. So I think that's what I would say at the moment.
And another question is, what is the significance to the slant of the walls that runs from the Memorial Plaza to the Wall of Names? And I think,
Um, it's a basic spatial um, decision, um, whereby one of our first ideas was that we wanted the public to be able to come right up to the edge of the crash site.
right,
That wasn't necessarily a given At the time, the temporary memorial was much further away,
Right.
and you were looking way down the hill at a chain link fence. And we wanted the walkway right along where that chain link fence was, so that the public could feel a connection to the crash site. And yet, it was very important that the public not go into the crash site. This was very clear from the families, from the Park Service, like this was sacred ground.
Right.
It's a burial place. And so how do you articulate that threshold between where the public is and where they can't go?
Right.
If we had put just a vertical wall, it would have seemed more of a barrier. And
Right.
so we came up with the idea of this sloped wall. So the space of the plaza sort of feels more continuous with what's beyond that wall. And you'll notice that, that wall drops down into the land 9 or 10 feet. So it is meant to be a barrier to dissuade people from going directly into the crash site, but it's also sloped to try to help them make that connection and not feel like they've been just um, separated off.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Paul, and you too. I remember the original design competition and have visited regularly ever since my first time there as a Red Cross volunteer. Such a special place.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Paul, so much for joining us this evening. I know that you're very busy, and when you talk to me about your plans over the next couple of months, it sounds like you have lots of work in process. So we're very fortunate that you took the time uh, to join us this evening. Um, you know,
No, thank you, Donna.
Flight 93 National Memorial reminds us that heroism and courage is not only remembered, it is experienced. Through design, landscape, and space, this place continues to ask something of us to reflect, to carry forward, and to live with intention. And with that, I will thank you all for joining us this evening. And thank you, Paul, for joining us. We appreciate you. And I'll be talking to you soon.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.